So let's talk about how we use the containerized deployment methodology that Wade was talking about to meet the 4 types of customers we were talking about earlier. First, let's look at the Digicert Managed private cloud customers. These customers are really kind of our historic customers, right? The folks coming to us for web PKI to manage SSL and do these kinds of things. Enterprise customers that are coming to us for completely managed user authentication and network device authentication, those types of customers. These customers, oftentimes, they're looking at using public trust. And for public trust, this is the only way that we're offering it moving forward, right? So we're managing it, we're doing the risk, we're doing the compliance, and all of the other types of workflows will be able to access public trust, but we're managing it, it's never going on site. The other attribute here is automation. So like everything in Digicert ONE, we want to ensure that customers have a fully automated environment for moving these attributes around and managing certificates. That is just crucial for what people are doing. The last aspect is this is fully managed. And that means Digicert is managing the entire PKI infrastructure, routes, ICAs, everything related to it. Customer has to worry about nothing but utilizing the system. What's magical is the deployment strategy Wade was talking about with the install machine driving the installation of the PKI system. That exact same installation scenario works for every type of customer we're talking about here, every type of deployment. So let's look at the Digicert Managed in-country deployment. So while we're thinking about how Digicert is operating, we have another kind of customer that comes into play. And so we have oftentimes government customers where they're looking for, maybe mid-levels of privacy. You have things where there's standards in regions like qualified certificates in like Europe and areas like that. And with these kinds of deployments, the government doesn't necessarily want to manage the whole PKI. They don't want to deploy these systems, but they want the benefits of PKI inside of their country. And the attributes for these kinds of systems could be things like the keys being geographically in that country, and so never being outside of that region. The data related to these customers sticking in that region. And really, ultimately, because Digicert is managing this, again, there's no customer management required. And so in this way, we're able to take this containerized application, deploy it country by country, and provide these kinds of services with key sovereignty, data protection, and meet the needs of these customers to provide mid-assurance government services. So for customer managed in-country deployment, what we're looking at here is really a customer who is concerned about the people who are managing the system, who has access to the data, who's performing validation, who's doing these services. They're concerned about data and key sovereignty. They want to make sure that data and those keys have the utmost security related to them. And really, they're looking to have their own fully managed environment to give them this high security. And so who are these customers? You're really looking at, again, government customers, but in this case, very high security deployments. And so in these instances, they can manage all of the data. They can do everything on their own infrastructure. Like a government customer, we also have enterprises. And the enterprise customer can use a deployment like this in their own data centers, in their own private cloud, in their public cloud, hybrid systems, but have it fully managed by them where the entire PKI infrastructure is completely under their control. Network, keys, data, everything. That's a customer managed in-country deployment. Last, we're looking at a customer managed in-factory deployment. Now, these are really interesting. These deployments really look at IoT type customers, IoT manufacturers, IoT device manufacturers, the IoT supply chain, the folks that supply chips and processors and secure enclaves into this environment, And then really kind of industrial use case. So these industrial customers, what they have in common is they're typically looking at an air gap environment. They're looking at something completely under their control that is maybe in the factory, next to assembly, assuring very, very high availability. They're looking at things like low latency, where now it's in the factory and there's no network connectivity issues, and they're able to use this very speedy deployment and integration into what they're doing in that factory. You also have multi-party. And so what we mean here is when you look at the supply chain use case, you have PKI that can be distributed through the supply chain with one owner, and the ability to manage those certificates as they're flowing through this whole organization and supplying them in this kind of deployment. Again, with this kind of deployment, we can have these installation machines install this highly scalable PKI, but in this air gap environment. And so it's with this kind of structure that we're really able to take PKI and utilizing this cloud native architecture, allow it to deploy in all these environments. We've reinvented PKI, and with this, we've driven out the cost and complexity of these kinds of systems. We have taken the physical servers and moved them into containers, complex networking infrastructure, moved it into Kubernetes, complex installation instructions, moved it into continuous integration, continuous development, and we've taken a bespoke architecture and turned it into a single repeatable architecture. This is really what's given us the world's most modern PKI and delivers PKI from months to minutes for any customer, regardless of who they are.